Giddey keeps it himself and takes it up as he glides with the finger
roll. What is up, and welcome to the Uncontested Postgame podcast. I'm your host tonight, Nick, as the Thunder lose to the Memphis Grizzlies by a final score of 121-110. We are proudly part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network and DailyThunder.com. If you don't already, please be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok as it relates to our other content outside the show. In this loss tonight, we'll start with some of our big picture takeaways like we typically do. Aleksej Pokusevski, I think, is the first guy we should talk about because, quite frankly, he was probably the most impactful player through the first quarter or two until he got hurt. If you guys didn't watch the game, he went down with another ankle injury tonight, right before the end of the second half. Did not play the second half at all. Thunder PR ruled him out, and hopefully it's a short-term injury, but he definitely looked like he was in pain leaving the game, going into the locker room. So all the best for Poku. Before he went out, though, and injured his ankle again, he looked spectacular. He had 3 blocks in the first quarter. He was 2 of 2 from beyond the arc, and that brought him to above the 40% mark from beyond the arc to this point in the season. And when we came into this year, I was the last person to guess he would be at this point, but I was preaching if Poku can just be a disruptive defender and hit outside shots as a 7-footer, he will be a valuable player. Did I think he would get to that point now? Absolutely not. I thought he was still probably 2 years away from being a real impact player. I thought maybe he could be much improved this season, but the leap he's made from last year to this year, I think a lot of people have talked about this. Shai is the Vegas favorite to win NBA Most Improved Player. I'm not saying Poku should be in that conversation at all, but as it relates to like true delta in terms of improvement, Poku's probably the most improved player on the Thunder. Last season just looked lost. He was still playing a lot of blue minutes. This season, I mean, he's a bona fide starter, assuming he comes back healthy and is fully cleared soon. Like, he will likely be a starter when he comes back. And like I said, 40% from 3. He's averaging like 1.9 blocks a game at this point. Like, what more do you want from a role player? Not only is he the perfect 3-and-D guy, but he's 7 feet tall. So in some matchups, and you're going to see this a lot this season, just given how small the Thunder are, like, he's the only 7-footer on the roster, and he's not built by any means. He's a slender guy, but you can throw him at center when you need to. We've seen that a lot. He can go up, and he's probably one of your better defenders against a traditional big. Next season, when Chet's back, that'll obviously be his role. Oklahoma City is going to have another lottery pick to bring in. They could maybe take a center, who knows? But until then, like, Poku can play center. And then once you have your centers in place, Poku can legitimately play anything from point guard to center. So I think the versatility, the 3-and-D upside as a role player, the 40% from 3 is incredible. For a guy like him that 2 years ago, we were wondering, like, will this guy ever be able to shoot the ball? Had maybe some of the least efficient shooting splits in the entire league, to get to where he is now is wildly impressive. He just looks more comfortable. He looks like an NBA player, and he's been really, really solid. So big takeaways pre-injury tonight. Poku looked really, really solid and was probably the Thunder's best player until he got hurt. Second takeaway, I think most people coming into this game were looking forward to Ja Morant versus Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And really, both of them were fairly disappointing on the night. Ja actually left the game late in the fourth quarter with an ankle injury, and hopefully he's good. Like, I don't care what team you root for if you're a fan of the game or just a decent human being. Like, you just hate seeing guys like that go down, especially a guy that's near the top of the league and one of the rising young guards. But Shai finishes with, in 34 minutes, he was 6 of 18, 15 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists. So not a horrible stat line, but probably his worst game of the year. For a guy that's averaging 32.5 points a game to only score 15. Not great. He only took 18 shots, like I mentioned. You probably like to see that jump a little bit, especially late in the game. We'll talk about that later. He just was kind of non-existent. But Shai's worst game, Ja wasn't great either. Looking at his box score, he finished 5 of 20 from the floor. Good grief, that's not great. 19 points, 11 assists, like you like to see that, 7 rebounds. But it was not the superstar rising guard star showdown you expected from those two. It was really the other guys that stepped up, and we'll talk about some of the other stat lines as we go through, but it was really the complementary players. Jaren Jackson Jr. was Memphis's best player tonight, but there was others that stepped up in Ja's sort of absence of production, and just wasn't the game we all expected. I expected to take this post-game podcast and talk about Ja having 40, Shai having 43, and just the young guards going at each other. It just wasn't that kind of night. Speaking of guards, another takeaway, Josh Giddey. I don't know what to think. Like, sophomore slump's a real thing. We see it with a lot of guys. Sophomore slump does not mean that player's never going to be good again, but there are certainly guys that are really, really good as rookies, have down sophomore seasons, and then end up being okay. He's been so inconsistent in the fact that even game to game, possession to possession, half to half, he'll have a few bad games where you're like, is this guy okay? Like, is there something wrong with his game? Then he'll have another game where he's great. Like, he'll triple double, or he'll shoot 3 of 5 from beyond the arc. And then he'll have quarters like he did the other night against Boston. We had like 3 turnovers to start the fourth quarter. So it's just been really inconsistent with him. I'm a bit worried about the jumper, and I'll talk about that again later. Even with Chip England, who's probably the best shooting coach in the entire league, Josh's shot is just so unorthodox that I worry, like, maybe he can develop into a 33% shooter, but I almost have no confidence in him becoming like a 40% shooter, like a really, really good 3-point shooter. I don't know. He's making bonehead mistakes that he didn't make as a rookie. We talked about him a lot last year. Is like, he's a young 19-year-old, but he plays like a veteran. Like, he plays like he's been in the league for 10 years and doesn't make the stupid rookie mistakes. His IQ's off the charts. And this season, it's just like he's taken a step back in that regard. He's still putting up solid numbers. He was, I think, the Thunder's leading shot taker tonight, which is kind of interesting. He's in the past been more of a passive player that doesn't take many shots. But yeah, 20 shots tonight, 10 of 20. Like, I'll take that. 50% from the floor is solid. 0 of 4 from 3. You don't like to see that. 0 of 1 from the line. Had 11 assists, 6 rebounds. So he essentially had the same stat line as Ja. 1 more point, 1 less rebound, same amount of shots, but it just looks different. Like, the mistakes, he had 3 turnovers. It seemed like a lot more. Just, I don't know. It's a sophomore slump, and it's up and down. And I'm hoping that as the season goes on, maybe it's just playing with Shai. Like, we didn't get to see a ton of that last year, and I don't think that by any means indicates those guys can't play together. But it is a very different version of Josh that we've seen the last couple games. On the same note, J-Dub reminds me a lot of a rookie Josh in the respect that he plays like a veteran that's actually a rookie. Most rookies take Ousmane Dieng. If Ousmane Dieng was playing in some of these recent games down the stretch, it would jump off the page that he's a young guy. He would make idiot mistakes. He would do things where you're like, oh, you should have made this pass, this read, should have shot this when you didn't. J-Dub's not like that. It seems like J-Dub goes out there, he's got zero nervousness. He has been in the league for a long time, is what it appears. If you're a fan that's never watched the Thunder, not super involved with the draft, I mean, J-Dub's obviously a lottery pick, so he's a big name. But if you weren't super in tune to the NBA and you just watch this game tonight as a Grizzlies fan, for example, you would look at J-Dub and think like, man, this guy has been in the league 5 or 6 years, similar to what we saw with Josh last year, like I talked about. So I'm hoping J-Dub doesn't take a step back next year. But it's been super impressive to see him contribute as a rookie. He's had spot starts. He's played a lot down the stretch. He's knocking down threes. He's got a crazy wingspan, plays a lot of defense. In fact, in college, you talked about this. He got his first college action because of his defense. His coach brought him in as a freshman for defensive assignment, and the rest is history. He becomes one of the greatest players in Santa Clara history. But he can play defense. He does it on both ends. He looks poised. He makes big plays, and I think he's going to be probably a second team all rookie kind of guy. But it's been super impressive so far watching J-Dub play. And then going back to Shai for kind of the final takeaway. I could be wrong on this. He came in with 5:09, I believe it was, in the game, which was interesting to me. It was a close game in the fourth quarter, and I figured he'd come in at 7 or 8 minutes and came in at 5:09. I don't think he took a shot, which, given he's tied for, or going into today at least, I don't know what Joel Embiid did tonight, probably went off. Shai was tied with Joel Embiid for third in the NBA in points per game. You would think that kind of guy, and I think he's actually third in clutch points too, behind De'Aaron Fox and somebody else. You would think that kind of guy would come in and be aggressive. And he came in and not that he was passing up shots, but he was like looking for other guys. I don't know if it's fatigue, like doing what Shai's done through the first month of the season takes a lot out of you. Like he puts the team on his back. He goes out there and he works for every basket. I know it looks effortless the way he changes speed and he has these kind of unorthodox herky-jerky moves. Like his body's probably like, I need a break. And maybe that was what happened tonight. Like they're on a 4-game road trip, been traveling, probably lack of sleep. He's been going off, had 37 points 2 games in a row. Tonight was quite the opposite. He comes in 5:09 left and wasn't much of a factor, right? If, again, going back to that analogy of if you're a Grizzlies fan that is not super in tune with the NBA, you probably wouldn't know that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is top 10 or should be considered top 10 in the league this year in terms of like MVP type performances. So interesting to see him not taking over late. I don't read into it. Again, can't do it every night. Nobody in the league does it every night. You look at Luka, you look at Jokic, you look at Giannis, like every guy has nights where they score 15 points and just don't look like a star. So if this were to continue, like maybe that's reason for concern, but it's just one game. But nonetheless, interesting to see him not try to take over late. So moving into the kind of game summary, we've talked about some bigger themes. If you guys didn't watch the game, or you're listening to the pod recording and just want a quick breakdown, some of the notes I took. It was a slow start. Thunder didn't score for the first 2 minutes plus, which resulted in a 7-2 start. So the Thunder scored their first points with 9:27 left in the first. Luckily, it was only 7-2. Like it could have been 15-2. In fact, after that 7-2 start, they continued to not score the ball, and it actually was 14-2 to start the game. They closed the gap like the Thunder always do. They're resilient. They fight. They never quit. And it was 33-28 after Q1. In that first quarter, it was really Poku, like I talked about, and J-Dub that carried the team. Shai was 1 of 6 in that first quarter for 2 points. The fact that the Thunder were only down 5 to a Grizzlies team, let's be real. The Grizzlies are a contender. Jaren Jackson Jr. is back. They're without Desmond Bane, but like this roster that Oklahoma City played tonight is a legit roster. And the fact that Shai only had 2 points in the first quarter and they were only down 5 is impressive, right? Like most games, Shai doesn't score and this team's down 20. Like there's been nights where he is the only offense this team has. So it's good to see Poku and J-Dub step up. Poku rolls his ankle in the second. We talked about that a bit. He would not return, but he did have a really, really solid outing up until that point. 59-63 at half. So the Thunder pull within 4. So down 5 at the end of the first, down 4 at the end of the second. It was SGA's lowest scoring first half of the season. He had 8 points at half. Obviously had 7 in the second half, so equally as bad. The story of the first half and really the game was rebounding and free throws. So at halftime, Oklahoma City was out rebounded by 10, and the free throw discrepancy was a plus 15 towards the Grizzlies. So even if they're shooting 70% from the line, like that's 8-9 points the Grizzlies are getting just based on free throws. I know a lot of Thunder fans were upset with the refs tonight, a lot of whistles being blown, but at the end of the day, like if the refs are blowing their whistles, there may be some bad calls, but the Thunder were definitely fouling quite a bit. They got in the Grizzlies got in the bonus late, and again, 15 extra free throws for the Grizzlies at the end of the first half. Outside of those two things, like the Thunder looked fine. They 38% from three, 45% from the floor. I mean, those are splits that you're going to be happy with, but it was just the boards and the free throws that had the 4-point difference there. Third quarter, really back and forth. The Thunder have been really, really good in the third quarter this season, like maybe the best third quarter team in the NBA in terms of net rating. Back and forth. Final 3 minutes of the third quarter, Memphis did pull away a little bit. At the end of the third quarter, the free throw discrepancy was actually bigger. It was 28-8 at the end of the third, so a plus 20 in the rebounding margin for the Grizzlies. Obviously, a huge advantage. At the end of the third, Thunder are down 9 points. It was 92-83. Jaren Jackson Jr. comes out early in the fourth quarter, knocks down a triple. That puts the Grizzlies up 12, which I think was their largest lead in the fourth quarter. Thunder kept fighting back, chipping away. It just seemed like the Thunder would get close, and then Jaren Jackson Jr. or John Conchar would just hit a big bucket and push the lead back out further. Ja Morant's ankle injury happened with 3:09 left in the game. It was a 6-point game at that point. And I think most people are sitting at home thinking like, man, Ja's out, 6-point game. Shai just checked in 2 minutes ago. Like there's a real chance Oklahoma City comes back and wins this game. They pulled within 4 points right after. Josh gets an and one, going to the line, about to make it a 1-possession game, misses the free throw. And then from there, just nothing doing for him. 7-0 run Grizzlies from that point on. And again, Oklahoma City falls 121-110 by the final score. So 11-point margin. I think it was a 6.5-point spread in Vegas. So Oklahoma City did not cover. Vegas is giving the Thunder some love. Like there was a lot of games earlier in the season where you saw 11, 12-point spreads, and even against a really, really good Grizzlies team, seeing 6.5 for the Thunder on the road is telling that this team puts up a fight and is starting to get some credit. So again, some more just kind of analysis or themes of the game overall. Was a loss. So I think that's 2-2 on the road trip for the Thunder. So super impressive road trip. Awesome to see them compete. They're on the longest road trip of their schedule this year. So in terms of like mileage, like this team has been traveling all over the place over the past week and going 2-2 against these teams that are like realistically probably all maybe not going to be in the playoffs, but will be fighting for a playoff spot. Like they weren't playing the Rockets or the Pistons or the Spurs or the Pacers, none of those teams that are towards the bottom of the standings. They're playing teams that are all currently playoff teams or will be playoff teams. So impressive 2-2 road trip for the Thunder, speaks to the coaching staff and the maturity of the young team. Been super impressed with that. Again, SGA didn't have a great game, but others stepping up is promising. Like I'm sure a lot of people out there are upset just from like a stat standpoint and an optic standpoint. Like the guy that has been putting Oklahoma City on the map this year and putting himself on the map, frankly, in SGA has a 15-point game. That's going to, I mean, this early in the season, that's going to knock his points per game down quite a bit. But to see the other guys step up, I think is a promising sign from a holistic team standpoint. So definitely some positives to take from the game overall. You just think about the flaws in this team. We talked about the rebounding tonight and the lack of a true center and not being able to use some players like you would like to, just given the personnel put in place is not complete. But if you add Chet Holmgren, who knows what he looks like when he comes back, there's always a risk. But if he looks like what he did in the 2 summer league circuits, and then you add another lottery pick, so Oklahoma City, barring them making the playoffs, and I'm on the camp that says like No way. They're a better team this year, and they have looked solid at times, but they're not going to make the playoffs. There's just too many good teams, right? It's not a shot at the Thunder. It's just there's too many good teams in the West, and it's going to be really, really hard. Like I think their ceiling is probably 12th. I think Jacob and I was talking about this. Jacob thinks they could be 11th in the West, which if that's their absolute ceiling, that's not a playoff team. It's not even a play-in team. So too many good teams in the West. I know the Lakers are below the Thunder right now. They're going to figure things out. Even if they are not an elite team, they've got too much talent not to ultimately be better than the Thunder at the end of the year. So between that, the Kings finally look okay. The Warriors are going to figure things out. Like there's just too many good teams for the Thunder to jump into the playoffs, meaning they will have a lottery pick, assuming something crazy doesn't happen. And it's a deep draft. If you guys have not looked at this draft, it is super deep. Like 2022 last year, everyone talked about there wasn't a true bona fide star. Like this draft has several guys that could be number one options on NBA teams one day. So even if Oklahoma City ends up with the 8th pick, like there's going to be a guy that will contribute for this team very, very early, like as soon as next year as a rookie. Add Chet to that equation. This team is like, I wouldn't say the puzzle's complete starting next year, but this team, we think about, being a bottom team, being a contending team, these middling teams, which is something that Presti and Daignault have said, like, we don't want to be in the middle. Like, we don't want to be mediocre. You want to break through that middle and go from a young, exciting, rebuilding team directly into contention. We've seen the Cavs kind of do this. We've seen the Grizzlies, the team that Oklahoma City played tonight. The Grizzlies were completely rebuilding. Like they traded away everybody, drafted Ja Morant at 2, and then they break through. That's what the Thunder are trying to do. With Chet and a lottery pick, I think next year, especially if they make a mediocre splash in free agency as well, they're going to break through. The puzzle's going to start looking much better. And then from there, you kind of fine tune and tweak and get better around the edges. And then 2-3 years from now, this Thunder team should be the trajectory they're on. They should be a contending team, a fighting for home court advantage in the Western Conference kind of team. And even looking at this team as it is today, that's not a team that's going to lose by 73. Like you saw the Thunder lose to the Grizzlies by 73 points last year. This team, especially when SJ is healthy, has too much talent to lose by that much. I know the team it appears younger, given Derek Favors and some of the guys that were traded this summer are gone. But this Thunder team's actually older on average than last year's Thunder team, and they're more talented and better. And I think if you've watched Thunder basketball this year, the record reflects it. The way they play reflects like this team has improved. So is 29 other teams. Really, they've all improved. They've all added talent through the draft or free agency or trades. But this Thunder team is better than last year, is older than last year, and continues to get better. The uncontested player of the game tonight, if you guys didn't see the graphic on Twitter, was Jalen Williams. He finishes with 15 points, 7 assists, 2 steals, 6 rebounds. Again, I called him on Twitter like a veteran rookie. Like he is a rookie by experience in the league, but the way he plays just comes off as a veteran. I think he's the perfect guy to have. I think most young teams, when you think about the draft, the strategy is like, let's take this 18, 19-year-old project and that has this super high ceiling and grow them. And we've seen that with Poku. We're going to see that with Ousmane Dieng. Whereas J-Dub was like a 3-year college guy, a little bit more polished. Given that, you might think his ceiling's not as high. His ceiling's pretty dang high. Like this is going to be a really, really good player. But those kind of guys, I think, are what help you build a culture on the come up of winning. And he is a rookie, but he's also, got a voice in the locker room, and he's got experience and a really solid player. I'm going to go through some comments here. Connor B says, I have insanely high expectations for J-Dub. Me as well. Just talked about that. Looks super solid. I think he's second team all rookie this season. And honestly, he's versatile. He can play small ball power forward. We've seen that this year. He could also play guard. If there's ever a world where Lou Dort is not on this team anymore, I think it's J-Dub's job for the taking. I'll say that. Josh shot 11 free throws alone. OKC shot 11 as a whole team. So going back to the free throw discrepancy, that's interesting that Ja Morant had as many free throws as Oklahoma City did as an entire team. That is brutal. Do you feel like a part of the Thunder fan base is turning on Giddey? Shai has an on-night passing up shots, but then lost is Giddey's fault. I don't think the fan base is turning on Giddey. I think they're being critical of Giddey. If you are like there's two ways players are evaluated in the NBA. It's based on draft position and or what you're being paid, right? So if let me think of an example here. If Steven Adams actually was a good example. He was making a lot of money for the Thunder his last few years and got a lot of criticism at times when he wasn't producing. If he was making $2 million a year with that production, people would say he's a steal. But when you start making a lot of money, the expectation from the fan base and from the front office, and deservedly so, like you get paid for what the team thinks you can produce. Your benchmark is what you make. It can also be a benchmark of where you're drafted. So Josh Giddey being drafted 6th, there's high expectations. He looked great last year. Taking a step back this year, there's a lot of critical comments about him, as there should be. Like he's expected to be a key piece of this core. Whereas if Josh Giddey was taken 34th, like JRE, I don't think anybody's mad, upset, even saying anything at all about Josh Giddey because of where he would have been drafted. So it's all relative. I don't think the fan base is turning on Josh. He's also had some really, really good nights, but the critical comments on Josh, I think, I wouldn't say they're deserved because I don't want to call the guy out, but he definitely has shown some flashes that are a bit concerning at times. I'll say that. Overall, I still think he's going to be a really solid player. I'm not worried at all about his long-term potential as a player because worst case, he's going to be a 8 rebound, 8 assist, 6'8" guard that can defend multiple positions. But the shot, it definitely does concern me overall. So we're going to go at 27 minutes now. I'll wrap it up here. Thunder finally finished the road trip. Again, they went 2-2. They're going to be at home now quite a bit moving forward. They have a home stand-up coming this next week. They've got the Knicks on Monday, the Nuggets Wednesday, the Bulls on Friday, all at Paycom Center. If you're a Thunder fan living in the area, get to the games. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is doing something right now. I know tonight was a little bit different, 15 points. But Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is doing something right now that is extremely impressive, and he is absolutely on pace to be the first Thunder All-Star since Chris Paul. So it's been a couple years. Get to the arena, cheer the team on, do the MVP chants for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander because what he's doing right now is special. I don't know if it's sustainable. 32.5 points a game coming into the night. That's tough to uphold. But in the meantime, get there, watch him, and just go watch the Thunder. They're a fun young team. Before you, it's going to be just like before. I'm not saying this is like KD, Russ Harden, but when teams that have this much upside break through, like we talked about earlier, it happens like that. Like this team is going to be rebuilding today, and then you're going to blink, and this team's going to be the 7th seed in the playoffs next year. So enjoy the upcoming and watch these guys while they're young, and before you know it, they're going to be there. So get to the games this week. Knicks Monday, Nuggets Wednesday, Bulls Friday. Before that even happens, we'll be with you guys Sunday for a group pod. If you have any questions, comments, topics you want to talk about, shoot those to us on DM. Until then, and as always, Thunder up.